All right, Pat, I'm guessing you can, there we go. Get started.
I would like to officially call the Amity Board of Education Finance Committee meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Hello, welcome back, everyone. Good to see everybody. Looks like everybody's healthy. Everybody's good. All right, let's go right into the minutes. Discussion and possible action on the minutes. We have a motion to.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from May 11th, 2020.
I'll second.
Is that Joe on the second or was that John?
That was John. I think it was John.
John.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. Any questions or discussion?
Well, too late now. We just passed it.
You just passed through.
I missed that one, didn't I? Thank you for missing. So let's move on to the next item. Moot point, done. Oh, Jenny, welcome, Jenny. Jenny joined at 5:33.
Hi.
Jenny, we just approved the minutes. Did you have any questions on the minutes?
No, I'm good with the minutes. I think
Thank you.
they're accurate. I just need to warn you, I've been having a lot of trouble with our modem. So if I'm in and out of the meeting, I apologize.
Well, thank you for the heads up.
Okay, been there, done that, so I'm totally with you.
Right? Thank you. Dr. Byers, the next item on our agenda, resolution for refunding bonds.
So I'm going to turn that over to Mrs. Loomis and ask her to explain the rather lengthy, long, detailed explanation that we have with respect to that. And then Terry, if you don't also mind, because this question came up, discussing what the difference is between refinancing and refunding, because it kind of sound like very similar things when you actually read the motions. So as you go through the explanation, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will try to answer that. So as we are getting ready for our bond issue for the monies that were approved back in December, Mark Chapman of Hilltop Securities, is always watching the market for us for an opportunity for us to save money on interest payments that we're currently paying on old debt. So at one point, this looked very favorable for us. However, as the market is improving, this opportunity may not materialize. We've been in contact with our bond counsel as well, Attorney Doug Gillette, and we thought it was best to get the approval. If the market changes again between now and the time we go out for the sale, we're ready to go. We might save the money. But if it doesn't, this would be good for a year. It's not significant enough savings to stand on its own. It only works if it goes with a larger refunding. As far as refunding and refinancing, I'm not exactly sure. I think it is pretty much the same. We are going to take this debt and refund it with a new borrower in order to save the finance cost. When you make the motion, just so you know, that first paragraph with the February 12th is just old language from a previous bond issue. Ours starts with the one saying June 8th. We don't have to read the motion. The whole motion just needs to be part of the minutes. It does talk about the issue of 2012 that we are refunding. It was originally a $4 million issue, and there's approximately 1.4, but we've been asked to have a threshold of $2 million to possibly refund. That kind of gives us the best case scenario should there be changes in the market.
So, but there's no mention of rates. So what's the rate trigger that would hit this? Because Fed's at 0, right? Basically, I mean, the Fed is quite low right now. So depending on rating and what we could get, but is there a certain threshold that we're looking for as far as a rate?
it's not so much the rate, it's the amount of savings that we could garnish. The amount of savings should be at least 2.5 times the cost of issuance. So in this case, we need to save about $50,000 in order to make this a viable venture. Right now, it's between $14,000 and $18,000 worth of savings on interest. You could tell on its own, it's not as significant. And the rates change day to day and right to the point we go out to the market, but it's what they project it to be. Really what savings they think it'll garnish. Obviously, we took this out in 2012. We've been paying for almost 8 years on it. So there's not a lot of debt left on this issue.
Like
but
2 years, right? Probably ish.
it was a 10-year.
It was a 10. Yeah. Okay.
But essentially, Mark Chapman kind of keeps an eye on the markets for us. And then if he sees that we hit that $50,000 threshold, then he would advise us to make that move somewhere within this 1 year period.
Right. So the cost to refinance is probably about 20,000. He's looking for a 50. It should be 2.5 times it.
Correct.
As far as savings go. So I'll make the motion on page 11. Do I need both motions together, or is one for the board and one for the finance?
One for the finance committee. So the first one is for finance.
Yeah, so the Amity Finance Committee recommends the Amity Board of Education consider and act on a resolution concerning the authorization of refunding bonds for payment of outstanding principal and interest on all or portion of district's 4,010,000 general obligation bonds issuance of 2012, and all costs related thereto.
We have a second.
Joe's
second
talking, but he's on mute. Oh,
I'll second that.
Matt second. All right.
I'm in. Yep. All in favor. I'm in.
I saw you waving, Joe.
Yeah, I was talking to the families over here on the other side. So yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you, Jen and Terry, for the very complete explanation. Do we have any other questions, however? Matt?
No, I'm good.
So Ms.
John?
Carroll, if it helps you out, I can call the roll once we're ready. Absolutely.
Questions, John? Jen, hearing none?
I'm good.
Okay,
All right, so calling the roll, Ms. Cardozo,
yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you all for your efficient responses. This is great. We're finally getting this down, right?
Exactly. Just in time for us to have to not do it anymore.
Let's hope, yes. And so now we are going to the next item on our agenda, which has to do with the discussion and possible action on the tuition rate for the coming year. Who would like to take us through that?
I will ask Ms. Loomis to take us through that initially. Absolutely.
Okay, so every year we come and ask, once our budget is passed, to set the tuition rate. It's a formula that we use based on the net current expenditure index for our budget increases. Certain things are included in the formula and certain things are excluded, such as grant money is included, debt service and transportation are excluded. So the tuition rate we're requesting for regular education is $18,596 for a non-resident. It's a $71 increase over the current school year. We also use the same similar formula using special ed expenses to develop a special ed base tuition rate. And that this year is $19,258. And we are looking to, and we always then have to add on specific services based on what a child might need according to their IEP. And we give the rates right now for those services below, and they would be added as needed.
I'll make that motion if nobody else wants to make it. I'll make the motion to move to recommend that the Amity Board of Education Move to approve the non-resident tuition rate for 2020-2021 school year at $18,596 and the non-resident special education-based tuition rate for 2020-2021 school year at $19,258 plus any additional services.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jenny. Discussion, questions?
Just refresh my memory now. So how does this work as far as admitting kids into this? I mean, is there a limit?
We don't necessarily have a limit, although depending on what a student needs, if it necessitated us adding an additional class that required additional teachers, we would say no. But what we essentially do is we take a look at the student's transcript. We look at the classes that they need, and then we make a decision. We'll also ask for disciplinary and attendance records. And then when we actually ultimately do accept the student, we just make it predicated on the part that they're still a good, upstanding citizen of the Amity community. And we reserve the right to remove them if we need to.
Okay. And I'm assuming that, of course, they have to get themselves to school every day.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
I was curious about the special ed. Can those costs sometimes get quite high for the parents?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're basing it off of an IEP, in some cases, like a behaviorist might be several hours per week on an IEP. So it does at a certain point probably become cost prohibitive for parents to actually elect to send students as a tuition student to Amity.
Thank you.
And there's no discount for being a staff member?
There is, it's part of the board policy. It depends on when you were hired.
Okay,
It's tiered as to what the discount is.
okay.
Thank you for all the work that put into this. I think that the memo was written so clearly. I thought it was very easy to understand. And if there are no further questions, we can call the vote.
All right, Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown? I see a thumbs up. Excellent.
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti?
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski?
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo?
Yes.
Dr. Turner?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Byers. And now that brings us to the next item in our agenda, which are the monthly finances. I think we've all been very interested to see how this has changed since we last met. So if you wouldn't mind taking us.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually, so first of all, we moved this further up in the agenda than where we normally would place it because we think all the other decisions that come after this are probably predicated on you knowing where we currently are. And the other thing is I'm going to ask if Ms. Loomis can share her screen because what we did do was she put together a very short PowerPoint that I think captures
Thank you.
what has happened to us in the past 2 months.
Can I just say at the beginning that this looks very USSR with the COVID and the red and the star. I'm just saying.
Well, you know that COVID virus is usually shown with red, and then we saw the bricks. It kind of reminded us of school. So that's kind of what we were
Don't
going.
read anything more into it than that. Okay.
It was mostly
right,
the
comrade.
bricks in the school.
All right. Thank you, comrade.
Okay, so what I'm going to highlight is really the major line items that were impacted by not having in-person instruction in the school buildings, not having our buildings open for building rentals and used at night, not having sports. So these are the 8 major areas that are affected. Obviously, school transportation, we've talked about a lot. There was not a need to not only bring students to school, there were no field trips, and there was not spring sports. Winter and spring sports. Winter sports almost made it through, but they were cut short as far as their tournaments, which would have resulted in additional trips, perhaps hopefully awards to give out and things. So those winter sports were cut short, and spring sports started to do some initial prep and training remotely with coaches. And then basically the word came out that they would not happen either. So that's officials, a few rentals. Obviously there's no wear and tear on that sporting equipment this season. So, some of the spring stuff may not have to be sent out to be reconditioned. Police coverage, both our SRO in the high school, and then the police coverage we have at many of these events that are large events, whether it be sporting events, whether it be graduation and whatnot. We normally, on a regular basis, the play, that runs for several weekends, where we would have coverage and we don't. And also, all of those things also tie into overtime costs for us, whether, school custodians, keeping our buildings ready and open for these events. Obviously, with the buses not running, we did not use the fuel that had been allotted to us. We are part of the consortium with the town of Woodbridge. So they did sell off the full fuel and we had to pay a fee for not using it, but it was still significantly less, about 40,000 less than actually taking the fuel into the buses. We did inquire about storage. That was just not an option. There was quite a flood in the market of fuel because clearly we were not the only ones not running our buses. Jim has done some estimates. You'll see later in the forecast discussion that utilities, obviously with the buildings not open in the evenings and not having the number of people in there, also having a very mild winter and a very mild spring. So we have to run the heat extensively or the air conditioning. One of the biggest factors is the medical account, being self-insured. This is an area where, we ride the waves and it can be uncomfortable, but right now, we're really on a high because if we had been fully insured at this point, our bills to Anthem, would have continued at the full premium, regardless of the fact that none of our, or very little staff were actually seeking medical treatment because as routine office visits and procedures were basically off limits to most people in the state of Connecticut and certainly across the country. So we are predicting it was at 95.7% in February. It's down to 84% of the budget. And I'm estimating it'll be down to 80% when we finish June. So that's a significant saving, over $800,000. Salaries, again, we talked about coaches, overtime, substitutes. Some of these things do have offsets, but not as to the extent of the savings. Dues and fees, as far as entering some of those tournaments, as far as our staff going out on conferences, and mileage and things like that, we're truncated in March. So those are some of the main areas. If we look at dollars, the February forecast, we estimated that we'd have about $559,000 left at the end of the year. Right now, our projection before we ask you to spend some of those funds would be about 2.8 million. Between our end of year purchases that we identified during the budget season to bring down the overall budget request, and things that we have identified, because while we see some savings now, we are mindful that we may have some cost ahead of us in the coming year as we try to reopen in a different environment than we left. If all of our requests are approved, the end of year fund balance right now is estimated to be 1.1 million, 1.135,000 unspent that would be returned to the member towns. That is after a 1% set aside for capital non-reoccurring. That request would come in probably the August or September meeting after we have largely gotten our audit ready and are really sure that those funds are there. But it is included in our 1.7 request. So just kind of like lines and dollars where the money came from. You see the salary, payroll taxes get adjusted with that. You have the transportation, the fuel, some rentals as far as sports goes, dues and fees, technology. Some of the things that we were planning to do, we did not do because people were not in the building and we had to really rethink our plan. So we kind of, you'll see, repurpose some of that to more meet our needs. So then contract reductions, whether that was the SRO officials, the athletic trainers, things that we renegotiated different amounts. The utilities, as I said there, the medical, obviously the largest line. The contingency was other than really for the professional services fees related to the upcoming athletic projects and the facilities projects, we really didn't have to tap into the contingency account for an emergency, which is always good. Revenue increased by 35,000. So that's kind of, those dollars associated with those categories. And then if we just talk about the fund balance without any end of year purchases and that 2.8 number, that would be about 5.79% of the overall budget. I did send out a survey to the state of Connecticut business managers last week. I have about 13 responses so far. The average is about 1.75% of their budgets left. That varies with some people who made comments that said our board has allowed us to put aside 1% and then we'll have money left. Our board has allowed us to make expenses and then we'll have money left. But the real difference was that there were 4 regional school districts, ourselves included. One was at 2% and then 2 were above us at over 6%. And I think that's just more indicative of how a regional school operates. They have things like the insurance on their budget, the fuel for transportation in their budget, that they have more, the high school sports and those type of things that may make it why we see the difference between a Board of Ed that is tied to directly to one town or a regional school. What the fund balance would look like if the end of year purchases are approved is still a 2.3% increase, or the 1.1 I talked about. 1.7 in end of year purchases includes the cuts from next year's budget and the emerging needs. And I believe this is the last slide. So this is kind of like where we have asked and gotten some approval in some cases, and where we'll finish off these requests in this month. So the budget cuts was 257,000. If you remember, that was some security items, some textbooks, and some minor things in there. And then we asked for 300,000 for infrastructure, and you'll see later in the packet how we're trying to bring that overall financing cost for that large project way down. And since there wasn't a need to use technology, if we can front load some more and try to capture some E-rate funds, we will really save on financing costs and bring that well under budget. We are requesting that we purchase the teacher devices, which was in next year's budget. But if we can purchase them now, then that frees up money in next year to purchase grades 9, 10, and 11. We had planned on 9 and 10th when we were developing the budget. But given the distance learning that is occurring now and our concern that it may happen again at some point during next year, we feel it's better to get the devices both in the teachers' hands and as many of the students as possible. PPE, the personal protection equipment, and this is equipment in the sense of face masks, gloves, shields, gowns. We're asking for a little bit more. The challenge here is to not know exactly what our guidelines are when we do reopen, to know exactly what those purchases should 100% look like, a place to store them, and just how many people to buy for. So we're going to be a little conservative there. We did ask for a request last month to make sure the nurses were set up. And this is for some more to get us at least have some kind of way to open up school, and wait for a little more guidance as to what the requirements will be specifically. Again, as far as reopening under a different environment, we're asking for security cameras, but thermal cameras, so that when students enter the buildings, they can be screened for 2 things. One, their temperature, and if they have a face mask on. Because if we get to a full operation of school and you're trying to let in 1,500 kids at once, there's no way that a nursing staff could stand there and even shoot an infrared thermometer at their forehead and identify that in a timely fashion to get kids into school. So these cameras about 100 people can go through in 30 seconds, I believe.
You can get about 100 people per minute.
Per minute, okay.
Yeah.
So we're looking to put one at each middle school, 2 at the high school because of the difference in size. One of those at the high school being a mobile one that we could, you know, when we're ready to have athletic events or a different event in a different space, we might, we can move that and then take temperatures other than just being fastened. They are regular security cameras as well. So should, you know, the time come, hopefully in the near future where we're not scanning for temperatures or masks, they will still operate as a security camera to let us know who is coming in the building. Software, we're asking for a software program that links both Munis and Frontline, which is our absence program, and our subfinder with our payroll system of record, which is Munis. Right now, there is a lot of data entry that is duplicated between both HR, payroll, and finance to keep these systems all talking to each other and having the same data. We've asked for this a couple years in the budget, though it's a lower item. You know, we've gotten by, but now that we are also looking to make our onboarding process more electronic as we're trying to limit the number of people coming into buildings, this is needed more than ever. Then again, the medical reserve. So what we are hearing in my CASBO meetings, which is the Connecticut Association of School Business Officials, and many of my readings about the insurance company and with our own insurance consultant, is that at some point we can anticipate an upward tick in insurance claims. Could be for one of 2 specific reasons. One, if there is a resurgence of COVID, we could have people seeking medical treatment, or as the routine procedures are allowed again, and they are starting this month. We do hear people that, you know, are going, and routine doctor visits. People will start to go back and do those things that were scheduled for this springtime, but also already scheduled for this coming school year. So we think that it's prudent to ask to bring that reserve up to 30%, get us through next year. If this materializes, then we go forward in our following year budget request with our same 25% reserve. If it doesn't materialize, we'll lower the reserve back down to 25%, and we can adjust what we have to ask for in the budget, and it could be some savings. If we don't put anything aside and we have that big upswing, it's going to be a bigger ask in the 21-22 budget in order to get our reserve back to the 25%. Unemployment, I'll tell you, is still a wild card. Let me get back to that. We've only gotten a bill through March. So there was only 2 weeks in March that we were shut down. So it is not, I don't have a good indication other than we know the number of people who have applied and the claims that we have given information to and waiting to see. So we are anticipating that April, May will be much higher, but I did lower that from, I believe it was 148 at one point that we thought it was going to be. And then the 1% capital and non-reoccurring, which, you know, I think we started to put on, you know, the opening message of our forecast in the spring, that it seems wise to put that aside again for capital projects, whether it's our roof in a few years and we don't have to bond for as much, or some other unknown coming our way.
And, you know, just for an example of some of those unknowns, and literally the picture for us changes all the time, but we just had some conversations with the State Department of Education that we may now be required to provide special education services for students after they have graduated or after they have turned 21, which is unusual. But because they feel that they didn't receive the services that they should have this spring, they are now looking at schools for trying to continue that. Not knowing kind of how these things are all going to play out, you know, we're really looking at that 1%, and it's a drop in a bucket of what we may actually have to spend But whether it's for PPEs or whether it's for unusual circumstances where they're kind of changing what the expectations of schools are, it seems to us to be the safest bet. And honestly, if it was 2%, I would feel better. But it's not. So the 1% is kind of the best we can do given the circumstance.
Well, thank you. That was a very informative presentation. I really appreciate you putting that together. Can I ask about the unemployment and what kinds of jobs are impacted by that?
Our substitutes are impacted by that, so they are the largest group. That may be the only group. There might be one or two here and there who had specific instances that weren't, but it's mainly the substitutes.
Thank you, Terry.
Would that
So
be
if-
long-term substitutes though? Only, right?
No, it's,
So
if you were regularly working, they would, if they file a claim, we have to provide their wages that they earned while working for us. I believe it's over a 2-year period.
So based on how much they've worked for us in the last 2 years, that would give them a base to make a unemployment claim.
Right. And the state would put together all the places they may have worked to come up with a
Right.
plan and then allocate it by the districts.
By a percentage or something, by where they've worked. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nope, sorry, that makes sense.
Well, that's good. They deserve to be paid. Okay, anybody else? I thought this presentation was fantastic and extremely helpful. Matt, Jenny,
So
John?
why don't we, and I'd like Joe and John to chime in after I get through, but let's talk about where the towns are at, because obviously that has a significant impact on Amity and everybody else. The town of Woodbridge historically has collected close to 99% of its taxes. As we speak today, we're short for the current year. This is the year 1920, by about $350,000. People are not paying us like they usually do. So we're going to be coming up short there. As we enter the new year, I don't know if Orange and Bethany have done anything in this regard, but we have given taxpayers the opportunity to defer their taxes by 3 months. So taxes that were due on July 1st, they're going to get until October 1st to pay them. And I'm disappointed in the fact that the requirements are very, not the right word, not very stringent. You just check a box that your income went down 20% and you don't have to pay your taxes. So it's looking to me, and again, I'm dying to hear what John and Joe have come up with, but it's looking like the town of Woodbridge is going to experience a definite shortfall in revenue. And even though we've done this, this 3-month deferral, I think we're going to see people are going to have difficulty paying their taxes. There was an article in the New Haven Register about unemployment, and Woodbridge, 169 towns and cities, Woodbridge is in the top 25 for unemployment, if you could believe that. And I'm sure Orange and Bethany probably aren't that far behind, but I just wanted to get on record as saying that the towns are going to struggle this year. At least the town of Woodbridge is going to struggle. I can assure you of that. So as we go through the things you want to buy and spend, understand that I don't think we're going to have the cash flow that we normally do, and it's going to be a problem. So if John and Joe could add to that what they're finding in their towns, I'd love to hear it.
All right, John, you can start. I'll go after you.
Yeah, Bethany is going to be on the same boat as Woodbridge. We actually left our reserve fund quite high and not reduce the mill rate to help accommodate that. But we haven't got. It's hard to say. It's all a guess, but we haven't gotten any preliminary numbers. But I think our reserve fund is at 21 or 22%. We anticipate that that's going to get cut at least in half and put us below our number that we would like to remain at after with the tax situation. So it's still up in the air. We don't know how many people will take advantage of it, but we also have a significant number of people who are laid off and unemployed now. So we're waiting to see where it's going to fall, but we're definitely anticipating a big hit for that.
I think the same with Orange. I think our unemployment in town was 15 or so percent, which is kind of mimicking the state and the country. So we're not sure about the tax collection. Our tax collection has typically been, like Matt said, 99% or so. We expect it to be down a little bit, although it'll come, hopefully. So let's see how it goes for July. I mean, a couple of things in this budget. Now, Tier, you have the $1.5 million. So it was $1.7 million. Now that $1.7 million includes the 257 that was cut from the 2021 budget.
Correct.
So that $1.7 million is calculated here. In the infrastructure, is that 300 part of the computer deposit, the technology deposit?
Yes.
Can we get this presentation to us, Tier, so we can present to our boards of finance, especially on the $1.7 million? That was the important. I was going to ask for that breakdown, but you provided it, so that's good. The medical reserve is a good idea. Are we getting that advice and guidance from our consultants?
Yes.
And tell me what the cafeteria for 100,000, Tier.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed that. So I had started talking in February about our cafeteria it just has not been generating enough income to be self-sustaining for repairing the equipment as it gets older. And the number of free and reduced lunch students increasing the way the state changed the Medicare formula. But it also gives an indication that there's not a lot of extra money for students to purchase a la carte meals. But now, with school shut down, there's no opportunity for kids to buy any a la carte. They're not there to make purchases. So we're still under contract. We are fortunate that we did get some revenue in because of the meal distribution program we are doing. We do get some reimbursement from the state on that. But we are also concerned that, again, going into next year, what will cafeteria service look like? We are being told that things will have to have more of an individual packaging because in order to be safe in a COVID environment, so there won't be the open buffets, the salad bars and things. And we won't be able to serve students all together in the cafeteria. So will that take more staff? Will that be serving carts? So I'm actually on a call tomorrow with the state in regards to food service and hopefully they'll have some information what it may look like.
So, Tier, regarding Chartwell's, have they provided us a credit for not working for 3 months, almost 2.5 months? Or how does that work with, I mean, they're under contract, but that's it? They don't give us a credit at all for people
We
that
all
are not
have to
working?
remember that Chartwell's has worked for us for 3 months.
Right.
We've been providing free and reduced meal service to not just
Okay.
Amity, but to all of the BOA districts. And we've been using our staff. Now, BOA has been part of that. They've been giving their commodities to us and they've been providing some of the food service workers. But at the same time, and we do get reimbursed by the federal government, but like Terry said, all of the extra add-ons that actually kick into a food service program, like ice cream, it's not happening. So Chartwell's, to be fair, has been actually very generous to our towns, and I think to the 650 people that we feed every single day with our lunch and breakfast program. And just hearing what you all said about unemployment, I think it's a necessary service that we're providing.
One question on unemployment, and I'm still not clear about it, just in general. What percentage do we pay of the claims? How does that work?
Because we do not pay an unemployment payroll tax as we go every year, we pay the full amount of the claims when they come through.
100%, Joe.
Yeah, okay.
If people in your town collect 200,000, you pay 200,000. So it's really, the state isn't kicking in anything. It's the towns have to pay the full boat.
Okay. Even for just for employees, John, that's how it works. That's how what do companies pay for unemployed
Well,
workers?
it's a rate that ranges from 1.9% to 6.9%, depending on your experience on the first 15,000 that a person earns. So if you're an employer, you pay 1.9 to 6.9, and that's what you pay. So it can get pretty significant. So I think the only additional point I'd like to bring out before I came to this meeting, I was watching Channel 79, and it was the Amity meeting where you guys discussed the budget before you went to town meeting, or whatever. And there was a letter there from the Orange Board of Finance requesting all the money back and not to use it. I just honestly think, and again, I don't know how it's going to go over, but a $2.871 million surplus, of which you're going to spend 1.735, I think that's going to be a real sticking point myself. I know it'll be in Orange. I can't speak for Bethany and Woodbridge, but I think it will be taken. People will take notice of it, because if ever there's a time when the towns could use money back, it's going to be this year. So,
but I
it's
mean, I'm
something
going
I
to make
think
that exact same argument for the school district.
Yeah.
You know, we have estimates that just to run schools, our PPEs could run $500,000.
Yeah.
That's the 1% surplus right there.
Yeah.
And we're talking about school buses that are typically a 78 passenger bus that can fit 12 students on it. Our transportation costs are astronomical. And we don't have the luxury that a town has of having a fund balance. We've never had that. So I was listening to John talk about sort of the reserves that you have. We don't have those. So our 1% that we're asking for is the reserve, which may barely cover the masks that we need to support the school district next year. Not even accounting for everything else.
Well, that's
we're
not
taking a very conservative look at this because we're realizing that there's some level of kind of impracticality to some of the demands that are being asked of schools to actually operate. But if those, and we won't know what those edicts are till probably mid-July.
Yeah.
So that's the struggle that we're facing, which is why, you know, I'm going to advocate very loudly for that 1%, because that's all that we have. We don't have anywhere else to go. You know, and Terry and I have talked, we understand the sort of burden that the towns are under with collecting taxes. And we've talked about ways in which we can defer some of our payments so that we don't have to ask for as much money from the towns sort of in that first kind of 3 months, because we know you all aren't collecting those taxes at those points. So, you know, we are very much aware of that as well. But it is, you know, just as much as I hear you're saying it's a challenge for the towns, if you can read some of the recommendations that are coming for schools, you're going to see that it is going to be an incredible challenge for schools. And as a regional district, we don't have a place to go to other than ourselves.
Jen, I wanted to ask, I had that concern about your PPE budget line. I know from last month you had mentioned the $500,000. Why is this at 18,000?
Because right now we really don't know what they're going to ask us to do. And truthfully, with the requirements that they seem to be coming down between transportation and PPEs, it seems I'm hedging my bets for more online learning, which is what you see in the one-to-one devices, the technology infrastructure. So we're sort of looking more at that and kind of holding back on the PPE. The other thing, frankly, is we just like the storage room we would need for all the PPE that we are supposed to have is like, there's just not enough room to put all of those things right now. So, so again, we're trying to be practical in that sense, and put the money into places where not only do we see kind of a long-term use, because we will always benefit by the technology and by the infrastructure, even by the security cameras. They're really high resolution. Having those at our front entrance just kind of goes along with the board's commitment to security. The PPE is the thing that we're going to take a small chance on, I guess, in the hopes that either A, the situation changes, B, they become more readily available, or C, somebody along the lines realizes that what they're asking for schools to provide is just not possible.
So what is the thinking in this 18,000? Is this like 2 weeks of PPE and we'll wing it if we have to from there, or what?
So it's a starting point. It's enough to get us up and rolling, I guess.
Like, or a couple days or weeks, or like teachers, or what is that?
So even that we're not quite sure of because we joined a consortium bid with ACES, but we don't really know what the prices are. They kind of wanted to know
okay.
more what our needs were first, and then they're going to go out and sort of bargain for the prices based on our needs. But it's probably at least a few weeks supply, depending on how many you're supposed to provide for the kids and how many people are actually here. There does seem to be flexibility that there is definitely a provide your own option. So we're really providing for those people who aren't providing their own right now.
Right. And one of the things we talked about early on was the idea of disposable masks 2 to 3 times per day, 50 cents a mask. But we're seeing companies now, and I can tell you my own company's just sent me 3 masks that are reusable, that are cloth masks that would be considered, to be used over multiple weeks and months. So I think the idea of disposable may go away, relatively quickly. Although, like I said, I'm glad you're only putting 18 there, right, and not anymore. The only area I would push back on maybe is I understand our medical reserve is down, but we've had guidance from other experts that 25% was way high. And to go to 30, I think will just give some people a heart attack. So I know there's certain things that haven't been done and people haven't had those procedures, but I think that sometimes those windows pass. So if you're going in for quarterly screening and the quarter has passed, you're not going to go back in time and do 2 screenings. So some of that may just evaporate. So I don't know if the medical reserve is necessary. I will, though, on the other side of this argument, and for the town, for our town friends, remind everyone that right now New Haven County is at 7.8% unemployment for New Haven County, and in January of 2011 it was at 10.7. So we're a good 3+ points away from where we were in 2011, and we didn't have these same issues. So I'm all for saving money and keeping it, reasonable, and I think some of that will be borne out. I think a lot of the job loss that we did see were jobs that paid under 40,000. That's typically not what we see in Woodbridge, right? We're not a lot of those $40,000 jobs in Woodbridge, and average household income in Orange and Bethany. So it's a conversation right now, right? We have time, but I appreciate the 2 sides of it.
I'm going to actually encourage us to, as much as we may want to talk about this, to move our meeting along, because we do have about 10 minutes until the board meeting is supposed to start. And we can probably fudge it a little bit by a few minutes, but we really wanted to give everybody this information because I think it does play relevance into some of the discussion items that we have later on when we talk about contracts and transfers.
Okay, so let's move on to the food service management contract amendment. I believe is that the next thing in here?
I believe so. Yeah, we've gone over the finances highlighted on these slides. So that is.
I believe it's on page 103. If anyone's following along in the packet.
Yes, 103.
So this is the last year of our contract with Chartwell's. Next year, where we will be required to bid it, is a process that is heavily guided by the state. They, through the contract and bid that was done 5 years ago, the most they can ask for is the consumer price index, the CPI, which they did, and we negotiated it down to 2.5%. Overall, it is about a $2,500 increase over the year between both of these fees. So we are asking to renew their contract for the final year at the rate stated in the memo.
So I'd like to make a motion to, sorry.
Nope, that's it. Go ahead, Chris.
Yep. Move to recommend the Amity Board of Education award a 1-year contract extension for 2020-2021 of Compass Group USA Inc., Chartwell's, per the proposed amendment, and the Director of Finance and Administration is authorized to sign the amendment.
I'll second that, Matt.
Discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the roll.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski, Mr. Grabowski.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Nuzzo
Yes.
and Dr. Turner. I see a yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving along, let's proceed to the award of contracts of 35,000 or more. What page is that? Page
104.
page. Yep,
104.
next page of the contract. So for this, Terry, would you also take us through? I'm sure most of us have read this, so we should be able to move through this quickly.
So the 2021, there's the district chiller maintenance contract, which is year one of a 3-year contract. It's a proprietary company, Train. We've used them. Siemens is our building controls. Again, it's a sole source vendor. It's the first year of an annual contract. And then the site-based grounds, which I believe is the year 2 of a 3-year contract, and the price is being held steady. So we are looking for those 3 to be our standard contracts this time of year to renew before we get into student devices.
Might we entertain a motion to combine the first 3 in one vote? Is that possible for sake of efficiency?
You absolutely could.
I'll make the motion for all 3 then.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Matt.
Matt.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All right,
Uh,
Ms. Cardozo?
I'll just
Yes.
make one
Please.
small, oh, sorry,
ahead,
one
Chris.
small question. Are we still cutting the grass when no one's at the school?
Oh, you didn't read the memo. And doing other things as well. Those people sound very fully employed.
No, I'm just teasing. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue with the vote.
All right, so this is a vote to take all 3 of them together.
Yes.
So Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're agreeing to take all 3 motions together. And so do we have a motion to recommend that the board awards those 3 contracts?
So moved.
Thank you, Jenny.
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you, Chris. All right, any other discussion? This is to approve the 3. All right, Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're moving on to item 4.
So item 4 is student devices. We had budgeted for grades 9 and 10. We are asking for grades 9 through 11 through Consolidated Computing to lease these devices. It's about 1,150 devices to cover the high school and better serve them in a one-to-one environment, and is particularly a distance learning environment.
So I will make a motion based on time that we move to recommend the board award items 4, 5, and 6. That is the laptops for the students, the laptops for the teachers, and the thermal cameras, the 4 thermal cameras. And that's one motion to approve all 3 items. Not to approve first and then go back and do a second approval.
Got it.
Got it.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jenny.
So explain to me now, this money is coming from where? This is.
So the
So
student-
the proposal would be to purchase the teacher laptops using the 2019-2020 funds that we have. It would allow us to get them to the teachers. They can actually start their professional development and learning on how to use those. And we're recommending that we purchase the teacher laptops because those do tend to last with the teachers longer. So we don't need to lease teacher laptops. We can buy them and hopefully get a few years of life out of them, presumably more than 3. And then the money that was budgeted in 2021 for the teacher laptops would then be used to support the additional devices that we need for grade 11 so that we can actually be better at providing a distance learning environment for our high school students.
So this isn't coming out of the $2.8 million surplus?
The teacher laptops are,
Okay.
but the student laptops wouldn't be because we would be using the funds that we had originally budgeted for the teacher
Next year's
laptops.
budget, okay.
And going back to Terry's presentation, that would have been one of the lines in that presentation where it said teacher infrastructure, correct?
Yes.
Teacher
Yeah.
laptop.
Teacher
devices.
devices.
131,000 for the
Thank you,
teacher
Chris.
laptops.
It is
Yeah.
hard sometimes doing this when you don't have paper in front of you. So I just want to make
Yeah.
sure we're all on
Right.
the same
Yeah.
page.
And then Matt, the thermal cameras are also coming out of the 2.8. But again, our ability to bring in even 750 kids through one door and check all their temperature, we just don't see any reasonable way to do it.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah, and the thermal cameras are only 40,000, so it's you know
Yep.
10,000 per camera. And the only thing I would like to say, I mean, as much as I think this will all go away at some point in the future, it could still be used for the next, you know, flu season, pandemic, what have you. It's not a bad thing to have in your doorway and when you're coming
Or
in.
just for
so.
security, as Dr. Byers pointed out.
Well, no, that too. It's a higher
So-
security, a higher definition camera. But from the temperature standpoint, it's not bad for your regular flu season either. So
For sake of time, are we in favor? Can we take the vote to combine these and then take a vote?
I made the motion.
Mr. Brow
Sorry.
already made the
It is one
motion to
motion.
just do one vote, approve them
Yeah.
all together.
Okay.
So it is take them all together as is, unless somebody has a major problem with one of them.
All right, so hearing none, I'm going to call the roll. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes,
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So that motion, those three motions pass.
Okay, so we have transfers under 3,000. If we're ready to move on, they're
Yeah.
listed there for your information.
And then we have the transfers for over 3,000, correct? Page
Right.
111.
So the first one being the thermal cameras that we just approved, the PPE that we talked about, and the cafeteria fund, which was talked about on the end of year, the software to bridge the munis and the front line, the laptops for the teacher devices. And that
So
is-
I'd like to make so the transfers under 3,000. Thank you. I looked through those. The transfers over 3,000 are moving money from one fund to another, medical to equipment, etc. There's a total of 5 altogether, encompassing the laptop, the software, the cafeteria funds, the personal protective equipment, and the thermal cameras. So I'd like to make a motion to take all those as one vote together, those 5 motions together. Thermal cameras, cafeteria, PPE, and software, and what was the last one? Laptop, which is basically what we already talked about before.
Is everyone clear on that?
But we're just we're moving monies from fund to fund because it's over
Yeah.
3,000.
Do
I
we
need
have
a
a second?
second for that motion.
I can second that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Any further questions for us? All right, hearing none, I'll call the roll. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes,
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Thumbs up. Awesome. All right.
We're going to move on to the next item in the packet, the self-insurance year to
Excuse me.
date. This one we may
Excuse me.
need to discuss, I believe.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just for clarification, that was for a vote to vote on all 5 together, but was that also at the same time to approve
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Vote and approve together. Yep,
Got it.
that was the
Thank you.
motion.
So this is what we've been talking about with the self-insurance. It gives you the figures of raising the reserve from 25% to 30% for a period of 1 year. And depending on the claims, it would be reduced back down in the next budget cycle. That's a dollar figure of about $229,311.
So I'm lukewarm on this one. I
So am
think
I.
it's,
It's a no for me, I'll tell you right now.
I'll make the motion to recommend then.
Okay. I'll second it so we can get to the discussion.
I just have a question in terms of the numbers. What is the actual number? I'm sorry, it might be in here. I can't see. It's a little hard to go back and forth with my eyes.
$230,000.
The difference between the 25% and the 30%?
$230,000. 230.
in there.
230,000, quarter of a
That's
million.
The increase of, yes.
That's the difference between 25 and 30.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no. It's just it's a 5%. It's 5%
Got
of
it.
our,
Do you have any other questions?
5 million or so.
I just agree that I don't think people who didn't spend the money are going to be running back. People aren't running to doctors anymore, including me. So I don't think it's necessary. So
Here's my concern on that. I am like eyes and all kinds of things that I haven't dealt with because of the pandemic. I do need to go back to that. My eyes are not getting any better. I think that we may lose some things, but others are definitely coming back. I'm concerned about a spike in the fall. And honestly, I'm concerned that next year is going to be worse financially for everyone than this one, because next year we'll have all of these people who've been unemployed not having earned as much, right? The taxes are going to fall for next year at the year when our Amity budget is the exploding year. And when we did the pushing things off, the textbooks, it's going to make things worse for next year. I'm worried that we're going to have that problem. I'd rather take it now in a year that, although bad, I think is likely to be less bad than next year. And then if we have the buffer of not having needed it, that money will be there to offset in the 2021 budget.
I just think if someone didn't have their eyes checked or didn't have their something checked, they're going to go have it done now, but the money's going to be there. We're going to have a budget for that. It's not going to be double. It's like, well, you didn't get your eyes checked last year, so you got to pay for that plus this year. I just don't think we need it.
Some of the
That's true with checkups, but we're also trying to plan for a COVID spike, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
That's part of it.
And some of the procedures that may have been routine and put off may have missed early signs in cases that become more serious because time has lapsed.
And our consultants recommended the increase, correct?
Correct.
They always do.
They always do. That's their job, is to protect you and
Since
recommend.
we've had this self-insurance plan, all we do is you got to do
Right.
it, you got to do it, you got to do it, and all we've had is surpluses. So
If you listen to Town of Orange, they think 16% is where you need to be, and we push for 25, and I'm happy with the the 20 to 25, but this seems, I don't know if we need this.
I think 30 is excessive for sure, for now.
Yeah.
I
We have
understand it, but I get it.
We have a surplus already. We're just
Right.
we're adding to that surplus. I don't know if we need to add to that
Yeah.
surplus. That's
I
that's
agree,
all.
Mr.
Chris.
Grabowski? Let me hear
I
from
agree.
Mr. Grabowski and Bethany.
No, I agree with Matt. I don't, every piece of advice we've got is put money in, put money in, put money in. And that's been a big source of, an surplus. And I just think, I agree with Matt in saying that, if they're not going to raise the prices if you haven't done anything. So I would not support that either.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like we have enough consensus to pass this. Should we take the vote?
We should
Sure.
still
Okay,
take the vote, yes.
So why don't we
Ms.
just do
Card-
that rather than belabor it?
Yep, Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Giglietti,
no,
Mr. Grabowski,
No.
Mr. Nuzzo,
No,
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
All right, motion fails.
I'd rather have the 1% reservoir than add to this percentage. So I think that's where I'd rather have the town support for that.
Okay, well, let's move on to the budget. Thank you all very much, but in the spirit of time, let's move on to the next item in our packet, which is the budget transfers of 3,000 or more.
This is just the standard end of year transfers that we do, is we balance up all the salary accounts, and any account that is over 3,000 needs a transfer. So these are just standard end of year transfers and approved.
I make a motion to move to recommend the Amity Board of Education authorize the Director of Finance and Administration to make the necessary budget transfer for salary and benefit accounts and to pay for standard charges. These budget transfers may exceed $3,000. The Director of Finance and Administration will report all budget transfers made to the Amity Finance Committee and the Amity Board of Education.
Do we have a second?
Oh, I'll second that. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Discussions? All right, Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Giglietti,
Yes.
Mr. Grabowski,
Yes.
Mr. Nuzzo,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay.
And the last item is an informational memo on how we're trying to finance the infrastructure project that was approved back in April, I believe, up to a $1.4 million threshold if we finance the entire project. The final thing we're working on is the exact dollar amount that we can get from the E-rate funds. This is the last of a 5-year block, so we're trying to capture every penny that is out there because that is grant money that the district will not have to pay. So that would just leave the remaining amount to be financed, but this is just informational.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Do we have any other business in front of us? Any items for next time? Hearing none?
Nice
Motion.
cat.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Excellent. We can all just chime in together.
Yes.